Dad, please help her. The millionaire's daughter begs when she sees a woman collapse in the snow. Winter winds swept through the stairways of 42nd Street Station, carrying the smell of smoke, iron, and loneliness. Emma Collins sat on a cold metal bench, her bare feet tucked beneath the hem of a wrinkled gray dress. Her hair hung in messy strands, and in her cracked hands she clutched an old sketchbook, the last piece of her former life. Less than a year ago, Emma had been a successful interior designer in Brooklyn. She had her own studio, loyal clients, and a fiancé, Mark Bennett, who promised her forever. But in a single night, everything collapsed. Mark vanished, taking every dollar from their joint business account, leaving behind a note that read, "I'm sorry. One day, you'll understand." She never did. And maybe she no longer wanted to. 6 months on the streets had taught her how to disappear, how to become invisible enough not to be heard again. Yet each night, she still drew in that battered notebook, as if sketching could anchor her to the person she once was. That Thursday night, the station was nearly empty. A few drunk commuters, a newspaper vendor, and the hollow voice of the loudspeaker announcing trains. Then the sound of small shoes echoed on the tiles. A little girl, no older than 5, stepped out of the shadows. Red coat, gray wool hat with a pom-pom. Her wide brown eyes fixed on Emma's face, deep and too knowing for a child. The girl stopped right in front of her. "Are you crying?" she asked softly. Emma forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, I'm not." The girl tilted her head. "But inside, you are." Emma froze. "I cry inside, too," the child continued, voice steady. "You don't have a home, and I don't have a mom. We're the same." The words hit like a whisper and a thunderclap all at once. For 6 months, no one had seen Emma. Not really. Not until this tiny stranger did. The girl opened a small paper bag from a fancy bakery and held it out. "You need to eat. I can't finish it all. Please." Emma hesitated. Not far away stood a tall man in a dark suit, talking on his phone. When he noticed his daughter offering food to a stranger, he strode over at once, his expression turning sharp. "Sophie," his tone was firm, "how many times have I told you not to talk to strangers?" The man, David Miller, glanced at Emma quickly, coldly. His eyes scanned, judged, and dismissed her in one motion. She knew that look, pity mixed with suspicion, the way society saw people like her, homeless, dangerous, or both. David pulled his daughter back. "I'm sorry, she shouldn't have bothered you." "She didn't bother me," Sophie protested, tugging his sleeve. "She needs to eat." "Sophie, that's enough." "No, it's not enough." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You never see anything, Dad. She's alone, like me." Her cry echoed through the station, startling the few bystanders. David's face flushed with discomfort. He bent to pick her up, but Emma spoke softly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Your dad's right." "No, no one's okay," Sophie shouted, her little voice trembling. "Mom's gone. Dad doesn't talk to me. Everyone pretends it's fine. But it's not." Silence fell, heavy and unbearable. David froze. Emma felt her throat tighten. Then the train arrived. The doors opened with a hiss. David lifted Sophie, still sobbing, and stepped inside. The paper bag slipped from her hand onto the floor. Emma bent down, picked it up, and tried to call out. But the doors were already closing. Through the window, she saw the girl's tear-streaked face pressed against the glass, small hands tapping, lips moving in words Emma couldn't hear. Then the train was gone. Emma stood there, holding the bag, a half-eaten sandwich, a tiny juice box. And finally let the tears fall. That night she ate half of it and saved the rest for morning. And for the first time in months, she felt something flicker inside her chest. Not quite hope, but the memory of it, fragile and trembling, refusing to die. 3 days after that night, the luxury apartment on the 27th floor of the Upper East Side was filled with an unsettling kind of silence. No little footsteps on the wooden floors, no humming of nursery songs. Sophie Miller, once a chatterbox who spoke to her dolls every morning, had gone completely silent. She sat at the kitchen table, small hands gripping a colored pencil, her eyes distant and empty. Across from her, David Miller sat with a cup of cold coffee, dark circles under his eyes. "Sweetheart, do you want pancakes?" No answer. "How about the park?" A small shake of her head. Nora, the nanny, sighed. "Sir, it's been 3 days. She won't talk, won't eat. She just keeps drawing." David looked at the paper in front of the child, a drawing of a woman with long blonde hair and a gray dress, sitting alone on a subway bench. The lines were clumsy, but the feeling was unmistakable. "She draws the same woman every time," Nora whispered. "Every single one." David's chest tightened. That night replayed in his mind the crying child, the quiet woman on the bench, and the unbearable sadness in both their eyes. Later that afternoon, he took Sophie to see Dr. Laura Bennett, the child psychologist he trusted most. Her office was warm and softly lit, scented with mint tea and faint lavender. Dr. Laura smiled gently at Sophie. "Sweetheart, can you tell me how you're feeling today?" Sophie didn't look up. She just kept drawing. The same woman, the same gray dress. After nearly an hour, David stepped outside the office with the doctor. His voice was low, uneasy. "What's happening to her?" "Doctor?" Laura studied him for a long moment before answering softly. "She's not broken, David. She's reliving an old trauma, the loss of her mother. That woman at the subway reminded Sophie of her pain. For the first time, she saw someone who felt what she feels. A connection?" David's throat went dry. "And when you pulled her away," Dr. Laura continued, "she experienced it as another loss, another abandonment. So she withdrew. She stopped speaking to protect herself." He leaned against the wall, guilt rising like a tide. "I was only trying to protect her," he whispered. "I know," Dr. Laura said gently. "But protection doesn't mean silence. Sometimes what a child needs isn't fixing. It's someone who listens." Through the glass door, David watched his daughter curl up in the chair, clutching the drawing to her chest as if it were her only comfort. And in that moment, he understood. All the money, power, and prestige he had meant nothing against the silence of a broken child. That night, instead of driving home, David circled the city aimlessly, past glowing skyscrapers and dark alleys where people huddled under cardboard sheets. In his mind, he saw her again, the woman in the gray dress, sitting alone under the harsh fluorescent lights of the subway. And for the first time in 2 years, David felt real fear, not of failure, not of loss, but of losing the only chance left to bring his daughter back. For 3 nights in a row, David went back to 42nd Street Station. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. Redemption, maybe, or just a faint trace of hope in the city's underground heartbeat. Every night he stood in the same spot where he had pulled his daughter away, surrounded by the hum of trains and the cold wind curling through the tunnels. And every night he saw her face again, the woman with the kind, haunted eyes that mirrored his daughter's pain. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No one appeared. On Thursday night, just as the last train was leaving, a small voice broke through the noise. "Dad, it's her." He turned, and there was Sophie, running across the platform, her tiny shoes echoing like a pulse. At the far end, beneath a flickering light, Emma sat by a column, pencil moving slowly over the pages of a battered sketchbook. Her gray dress was frayed, her hands were cold and trembling, her bare feet tucked beneath her legs. But when she looked up, David knew. It was her. Sophie threw herself into Emma's arms, her voice cracking through tears. "You're really here. I thought you were gone. Like Mommy." Emma froze, then wrapped the child in her arms, her own voice shaking. "No, sweetheart, I'm still here." David stood a few steps away, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. For the first time in weeks, he heard Sophie's voice again, not hollow, not numb, but alive. He walked closer, his voice rough. "Thank you." Emma looked up, tired but gentle. "You don't need to thank me." She just remembered what it feels like to be heard. "Would you have dinner with us?" David asked. Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to stay invisible, to protect herself. But Sophie's small hand clung to hers with desperate trust. "All right," she whispered, "but somewhere public." They found a tiny 24-hour diner on Lexington Avenue. Warm light, chrome tables, the scent of coffee and pastries. The waitress didn't ask questions when Emma walked in barefoot. She simply poured her a hot cup. Sophie sat beside her, holding her hand tightly, afraid she might disappear again. "You have to eat too," Sophie said firmly. Emma smiled, broke her pastry in half, and handed her the piece. "Now we can." David watched them quietly. There was something effortless about the way Emma spoke to his daughter. No pity, no pretense, just quiet understanding. And in the soft light of the diner, he saw Sophie finish her meal for the first time in days. "She trusts you," he murmured. Emma lowered her gaze. "Maybe because I used to be her." David looked at her. "You mean, I lost everything once," she said softly. "My home, the person I loved, the life I thought I'd always have. I know what it feels like." Silence settled between them, warm and fragile. "I talked to Dr. Laura," David said finally. "She said Sophie needs to feel safe, and you're the only one who's made that happen." Emma gave a faint, weary smile. "I'm just a stranger, Mr. Miller. Tomorrow I'll be somewhere else. She'll forget me." David shook his head. "No, I don't want her to forget. I want you to come live with us." She blinked. "What? Not as an employee? You'll have your own room, a salary, everything you need. I just want Sophie to have a chance to be happy." Emma stared at him, stunned. "I don't take charity." "This isn't charity," he said simply. "It's an offer." Sophie looked up at Emma, her voice trembling. "Please, Miss Emma, don't disappear again." Something in that tiny plea broke Emma's walls completely. It had been so long since anyone needed her. She took a shaky breath. "All right, but I have conditions. I want to study again, get my license back, and if I ever feel disrespected, I leave." David nodded, relief softening his features. "Deal?" When they stepped out of the diner, the sky was just beginning to pale. The city wind was cold, but not cruel. Sophie's hand was small but strong in Emma's, her heartbeat pulsing through that fragile connection. The Miller residence on the Upper East Side didn't feel like a home. It felt like another world. 3 stories of glass and white stone, polished hallways that smelled faintly of oak and citrus. Everything was too clean, too still, too far from anything Emma had ever known. She stood at the back door, clutching the strap of her worn backpack as the housekeeper opened it with polite reserve. "Miss Collins, your room is at the end of the hall," the woman said, her tone formal but cool. That first evening, she ate dinner with Sophie in the kitchen. The little girl talked without pause, about school, her friends, the neighbor's cat. David walked by the doorway, stopping when he heard laughter. His daughter was smiling. Really smiling, for the first time in months. And for a moment he forgot that the woman at the table had once been homeless. All he saw was someone who made his child whole again. Not everyone shared that feeling. Nora, the longtime nanny, watched Emma with thinly veiled distrust. When David announced that Emma would be living with them, she had asked the question out loud that everyone else only thought. "Who is she? Where did you find her?" No one answered, but everyone heard. Emma kept her head down, focused on Sophie. They did homework together, drew pictures in the afternoons. At first, Emma drew just to pass time, but soon Sophie began to join her, bringing paper and crayons to the garden. "Teach me," she said one afternoon. And under the shade of the maple tree, they drew little houses with red roofs and round windows. "If you could design your own house," Emma asked, "what would it look like?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "A big one with a garden, for people who don't have homes, so they can sleep somewhere warm, like you." Emma froze for a heartbeat. Then she smiled, slow and tender. "That's a beautiful idea, Sophie." That night, David came home late. As he passed the living room, he heard laughter from the kitchen, soft, light, the kind that made the air warmer. The smell of pastries lingered, the glow from the light spilling onto the floor. Sophie was talking about her day, Emma listening with that calm, attentive expression. David stood at the doorway for a long moment, saying nothing, afraid that stepping in would break whatever fragile magic was holding the house together. Later, when Sophie was asleep, he knocked on Emma's door. She was sitting by her laptop, blue light on her face, attending an online class. Her hair was loose, her focus steady. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "Not at all." She turned down the volume. He leaned against the doorframe. "Thank you. She's different now. Happier?" "I just spent time with her," Emma said softly. "Maybe that's all she needed. Someone who listens." "Then maybe I have something to learn from you," he admitted with a small, shy smile. They fell quiet. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. 1 second. 2, 3. A silence that wasn't awkward, just heavy with something unspoken. David glanced around the small room, the old backpack in the corner, the sketchbook on the desk, half-finished drawings spread like scattered thoughts. "I never thought," he said quietly, "that a stranger could make this house feel less empty." Emma lowered her eyes, hiding the flicker of emotion there. "Maybe it's not about being strangers. Sometimes all it takes is someone who actually sees you." He nodded, then left. But that night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the way her voice sounded, soft but sure, how her presence made the silence in his house less cruel. And in her room, Emma sat for a while before closing her laptop. She couldn't explain why this house, this life that wasn't hers, made her heart beat faster. Maybe it was the way Sophie laughed again. Maybe it was the way David looked at her, like she mattered. Or maybe it was simply that, for the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. The days that followed carried a strange, quiet peace. The Miller house began to breathe again, Sophie's laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of morning coffee and late-night conversations whispered over dim kitchen light. Sometimes, when the house fell silent, David would pour 2 cups of coffee and slide one toward Emma without a word. They'd sit together, speaking softly about everything and nothing, safe topics that somehow led them closer. "What did you want to be as a kid?" Emma asked one rainy evening. David chuckled. "Not a numbers guy. I wanted to be a musician. My father said music doesn't pay rent." Emma smiled faintly. "I used to dream of designing homes for people without one. Back then, it sounded simple. Just walls, a roof, a window, and happiness. Now I know it takes more than bricks to build that." He studied her. "You could still do it. Not everyone gets a second chance. If you do, don't waste it." His words lingered in her chest like a seed taking root. They stayed up late. But before Emma could say good night, thunder cracked through the sky, deep and violent, like the pulse of something old waking up. Within an hour, the storm was in full force. Rain slammed the windows, wind howled through the garden. Lightning split the dark, then the power went out. A scream shattered the silence. "Mom!" David shot up. "Sophie!" They both ran upstairs. At the end of the hall, Sophie's door stood open. The little girl crouched in the corner of her bed, hands over her ears, trembling. Lightning flashed again, illuminating her tear-streaked face. Emma dropped to her knees, gathered Sophie into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just the rain." "No, it's not," Sophie cried. It was raining that night, too. There was thunder, light, the car slipped, and Mom never came back. Her voice broke apart. Emma's chest tightened. She held Sophie closer. "I know, honey. I used to be afraid of thunder, too. I thought it meant someone was leaving, but it's just sound. It doesn't mean goodbye." "Really?" "Really," Emma whispered. "And you know what? Some people say when it rains, the ones we love are thinking about us." Sophie blinked up at her. "So, Mom's thinking about me?" Emma smiled gently. "I'm sure she is." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside, something softened. Emma lit a candle. The faint gold glow spread across the room. She began to sing, a lullaby her mother used to hum when she was small. Her voice blended with the rain, thin but steady, wrapping the darkness in something tender. Sophie rested her head on Emma's shoulder. Her breathing slowed, her small hands finally relaxed. The door opened quietly. David stood there, motionless. He didn't step in, just watched. The candlelight painted soft shadows over Emma's face, her voice weaving through the storm like a thread stitching two broken hearts back together. When the lightning flashed, she looked up. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the world was still. In that brief glance, there was grief, gratitude, and something new, fragile but real. Sophie slept soundly. Emma tucked her in, turned, and found David still there, eyes glistening. "She's fine now," she whispered. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to," she murmured. "Just be here." They went downstairs. The power was still out. David lit the gas stove and made coffee. The two of them sat at the kitchen table, the candle burning low. It was there, in that quiet, that he finally spoke about Marianne, his wife. The story came out in fragments: young love, mistakes, the fight that morning, the accident that evening. "I think I deserved it," he said softly. "I'm terrified to love again, terrified to lose again." Emma didn't interrupt. Then she told him her story about the man who betrayed her, the business she lost, the blueprints that never got built. "I thought I'd never design again," she admitted. "But maybe I just needed to rebuild from the ruins." He met her gaze, something bright flickering behind his tired eyes. "Maybe that's what we're both doing, learning how to start again." They smiled, tired, honest, and warm. Outside, the storm still raged. But in that small kitchen, something else was growing. Quiet, fragile, and real enough to make them both afraid to name it. The days after the storm passed in a fragile kind of calm. No one spoke about that night, but something between Emma and David had shifted. They didn't need to say much. Just sitting together with cups of coffee late at night, listening to the rain outside or watching the streetlights reflect through the window, was enough. Each quiet conversation, each lingering glance, blurred the distance between them a little more. One morning, while Emma was teaching Sophie to color in the garden, a woman's voice drifted from behind, sharp enough to change the air. What a charming little scene. Margaret Miller, David's mother, stood on the stone path, a Chanel bag hanging from her wrist, her gaze sweeping Emma from head to toe. "David, how long have you been keeping her hidden here?" David stepped out from the porch, calm as ever. "Mother, this is Emma. She's been helping Sophie with her lessons and work." "Helping?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. Then you should bring her to the foundation gala this Saturday. If she's spending this much time around your daughter, people should at least know who she is. Emma hesitated, but David simply nodded. If you're comfortable, we'll go. That evening, the ballroom at the plaza glowed with golden light. Music floated through the air, glasses clinked, perfume mingled with the hum of polished conversation. Emma stood beside David, wearing the navy dress he'd left outside her door. Simple, elegant, perfectly fitted. She tried to steady herself under the curious glances and soft, poisonous whispers around her. Margaret appeared through the crowd, every step measured, poised. "My son's compassion truly amazes me," she said, her voice light but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Not every man would have the courage to bring his assistant to an event like this. The pause in her tone said more than the words themselves. Emma felt her cheeks burn, her fingers tightened around the glass in her hand. But before she could respond, David placed his hand gently on her back and spoke. Steady, clear. "Emma isn't my assistant, Mother. She's the person who helped Sophie face her fears and find her laughter again. If there's anyone here worth admiring tonight, it's her, not me." The murmurs faded. Margaret blinked, momentarily speechless. Emma stood frozen, her heart pounding, torn between humiliation and an ache of gratitude. When they left the gala, Fifth Avenue shimmered under a haze of city light. They walked side by side in silence. At a corner, Emma's hand brushed against his. He didn't pull away. For a moment, they just walked, the distance between them narrowing with each quiet step. Under the streetlight, their eyes met, and David stepped back slightly. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I shouldn't." She smiled faintly, covering the sting that spread in her chest. "It's okay," she whispered. But the rest of the drive home was silent. Later that night, David was still at the office. Emma made tea and sat in the living room, reading. The sound of wind outside made her shiver. When the door creaked open, she thought he had come home early. But the man standing there wasn't David. "Hello, Emma," a cold, mocking voice said. "Didn't think you'd land somewhere this nice." Emma froze. "Mark?" She stood quickly, her breath catching. "Get out. I'm calling the police." "Oh, come on," Mark smirked, taking a step closer. "I just want to talk. Drop the charges, and I'll give you back part of the money. We both win." "Never?" Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. His expression darkened. "You really think he loves you? David Miller pities you. You're his redemption story, that's all. Men like him don't marry women like you." "Get out," she said, her tone trembling but fierce. Behind her, another voice cut through the air, cold, sharp. "You should listen to her." David's silhouette emerged from the shadows, his gaze like steel. Mark turned, smirking. "You actually believe she's different? She's just using your guilt, man." David didn't answer. He moved fast, grabbed Mark by the collar, and shoved him hard toward the door. "If you ever come near her again, you'll regret it." The door slammed shut, leaving the house in ringing silence. Emma stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard, her hands ice cold. David turned back toward her, still catching his breath. But in his eyes, beyond the anger, something else flickered. Hesitation, doubt, the kind that creeps in quietly and poisons everything. "You heard him," Emma said softly, her voice trembling. He looked at her, then away. "I just need time to think." The words landed like a blade, clean and quiet. He turned and walked upstairs, leaving the living room swallowed by shadows and the faint scent of rain and fear. Emma sank into the chair, pressing her hands together to stop them from shaking. She had known the feeling of being left behind before, but this was different, because this time she had truly believed she'd been seen. and that made the silence he left behind unbearable. The days after that tense conversation felt heavy, as if the house itself had forgotten how to breathe. David buried himself in work, staying late at the office, avoiding unnecessary words. Emma still cared for Sophie, still smiled, but the light in her eyes had dimmed, fragile, flickering like a candle fighting the wind. Margaret arrived one rainy afternoon while Emma was helping Sophie paint in the living room. "How lovely," she said softly, though her tone carried weight. "But David, you have to think long-term. A child who's lost her mother shouldn't get too attached to someone who might leave at any moment." David's hands tightened, but he said nothing. She continued, "The girl needs stability, and this woman," her eyes flicked toward Emma, "has her own life, her own past. We can't know it all." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, David found Emma in the kitchen. She was washing cups, her back turned. His voice was careful, almost hesitant. "Emma, I think the best thing for Sophie right now is to keep her safe. No more uncertainty, no more risk." She put the cup down slowly. Water dripped from her fingers. "You mean me, don't you?" He didn't meet her eyes. "I just don't want her to be hurt again." "You're afraid I'll hurt her?" "I'm afraid she'll lose someone else she loves." Silence hung thick between them. Finally, Emma nodded. "I understand." The next morning, she woke early to pack. Sophie came out, hair tousled, eyes half open. "Miss Emma, where are you going?" Emma knelt, brushing the girl's cheek. "I have to go for a while, sweetheart. There are things I need to take care of." "No," Sophie screamed. "You promised. Everyone lies. Mom left, and now you're leaving too." She began to throw things, breaking a glass on the table, scratching her own arms until they bled. David rushed in, trying to hold her, but she fought him, sobbing hysterically. "I hate everyone. Everyone leaves." Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, then turned and walked out the door before her knees gave way. David wanted to call her back, but Sophie's cries drowned everything. An hour later, Dr. Laura Bennett, Sophie's therapist, arrived. She examined the child's small wounds, then turned to David, her voice sharp. "You've just made your daughter relive her trauma of abandonment. You think this is safety?" David sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I just wanted to protect her." "You're protecting your own fear," Laura said evenly, "not Sophie's heart." The words hit him like a blade, cutting through every defense he had built. He stood abruptly, grabbed his keys, and left the house into the thick gray rain. When the train stopped at 42nd Street Station, he saw her instantly. Emma sat on the steps, her coat soaked, handing out sandwiches to the homeless. Every time she smiled, her face lit up, small, warm, heartbreakingly human. He walked toward her, voice rough. "Emma." She looked up, calm but tired, the fight gone from her eyes. "David." "I was wrong," he said, breath catching. "I let fear run my life. I said I wanted to keep Sophie safe, but really, I was just running from what I felt. I was afraid to love again, afraid to lose. But when you left, I realized the worst thing wasn't losing you. It was letting you believe I didn't trust you." She said nothing. Rain fell harder, dripping from her hair. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I sent your portfolio to 5 architecture firms. 3 want to meet you. And next week I arranged a small exhibition for you at a gallery in Brooklyn." Emma stared at him, voice trembling. "Do you think I need saving?" "No," he said quietly. "You don't need to be saved. You just deserve to be seen." She held his gaze for a long time, then nodded. "Then you see me now." For a moment it felt like even the rain paused. A train rumbled in the distance. In the dim mist she stood up, taking his hand, not to be led, but to walk beside him. "I'll come back," she said softly, "but not as someone being rescued, as myself." David smiled through the tears and rain. For the first time in years, his heart felt alive, whole, fearless, and finally free. The next morning, Emma returned to the Miller house, not as someone seeking permission to come back, but with the quiet certainty of a woman who knew where she belonged. David opened the door, his eyes caught between relief and fear, as if one wrong move might make her disappear again. Emma placed a small envelope on the table. "This is rent, a symbolic one. I don't want anyone thinking I came back out of pity." David looked at her, his gaze softening. "I never thought that." She smiled faintly. "But I need to think that." In the weeks that followed, the house regained its warmth, not fragile this time, but steady. Emma started taking small design projects, a cafe renovation, a community center in need of consultation. Each sketch, each signed contract, felt like air filling her lungs again after months underwater. Word of her exhibition spread, bringing new offers. Slowly, Emma Collins, now pursuing her architecture license again, became a name people trusted once more. Sophie was brighter, happier. She laughed more, slept better, and no longer flinched at thunder. One afternoon, as Emma was revising plans, Sophie placed a drawing on her desk. 3 people holding hands beneath the sun. "I know now," she said proudly. "You're Daddy's girlfriend and an architect. I can tell everyone that at school." Emma laughed, pulling her close. "Thank you, sweetheart." A year passed. Summer returned with golden light and gentle wind. On a Friday afternoon, while walking Sophie to art class, they passed 42nd Street Station, the place where everything had begun. Sophie tugged Emma's sleeve. "Look!" On the same bench sat a young woman, shivering, clutching a torn backpack, eyes red from crying. Emma paused, then walked over, sitting beside her. "Hey," she said softly. "Do you have anywhere to go?" The girl shook her head. "No, I just need some time." Emma pulled a card from her bag, writing a number on the back. "This has a list of shelters and a training program for people rebuilding their lives. If you want, call me. It's not charity. It's a chance." The girl looked at the card, tears welling. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone once helped me," Emma said, voice barely above a whisper. Sophie opened her lunchbox and handed it to the girl. "You should eat. It's easier to think when you're full." The girl burst into tears, clutching the box, while Emma placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The sunlight through the glass roof spilled across the platform, spreading warmth, a small ripple of kindness traveling farther than either of them could see. A month later, the Miller garden bloomed white with lilies. The wedding was simple, intimate, filled only with those who had witnessed their journey. Dr. Laura, the housekeeper Nora, Emma's colleagues, and Margaret. The older woman arrived early, carrying a bouquet of lilies, and approached Emma. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I judged you out of fear and pride. Thank you for giving my son and granddaughter a chance at happiness." Emma took her hand gently. "And thank you for letting me belong, not as an outsider, but as family." Sophie was the flower girl, dressed in white, a small wreath in her hair. When the adults fell silent, she walked to the front, holding a tiny microphone, her voice clear and steady. "My teacher asked me what family means," she began. "I said family isn't just blood, it's who stays when things get hard. It's who sees you when you're scared, and stays anyway." No one spoke. The garden held its breath. Then Emma knelt, wrapping Sophie in her arms. "You just said what's been in my heart, sweetheart." As twilight painted the sky, Emma looked around, the people she loved, the lights twinkling overhead, the peace she had fought so hard to earn. Turning to David, she whispered, "You know, I didn't just get my life back. I built a new one, and it all started on a bench at a train station." David squeezed her hand, smiling. "And you made mine start there, too."